Good morning, everybody. Let me ask you a couple of questions. Are you a YouTuber? Is your website hackable? And you don't have to engage, you don't have to answer this one if you don't want to, but are you engaging in clickbait? YouTuber, hackable, clickbait. These are just a few of the many words that were entered into the Oxford English Language Dictionary in 2016. And we all know that the English language is always changing and evolving, as is marketing. But the thing with marketing in the last 15, 20 years, it's done more than evolve. It's exploded in terms of all the avenues that are available to professionals in terms of marketing. And along with those avenues, the new terminology has evolved, leaving many professionals who didn't study marketing in school more mystified than ever. And even for those of us who did study marketing, there's such an explosion of terminology, new terminology, that it's running and running and running to keep up with it. But what we're here to do today is to demystify marketing jargon and to talk about what it means to you and your firm. My name's Sharon Berman. My company is Burbay Marketing and Public Relations, and we create the visibility and credibility that fuel revenue growth. Okay, we're going to start with some basics because these are words that people use, that professionals, all of us use all of the time. However, there's really a lot of confusion about what they mean. So let's just start with one of the most basic terms. Marketing. What's marketing? Well, I have a red carpet graphic here because that's what marketing is. And if you look up, I know when I look up the definition of marketing, it's convoluted. It doesn't really mean anything to me. But for professionals, what marketing really is about the lead generation, getting the phone to ring. And it's everything you're doing to roll out the red carpet ahead of you. It's your email, it's your website, it's your direct mail, it's your seminars and webinars, everything that is creating awareness and visibility in your markets so that when there is a need, you come to mind first. It's about lead generation. That's different than when we talk about sales. Sales is when you have the opportunity to be in front of somebody. When somebody's picked up the phone and they say, I want to talk to you about my need, and you're talking with them and listening and advising before and going through the process of converting them to a client. That's sales. Sales does not mean being like a used car salesperson. I know it's a word that a lot of professionals want to avoid, but really what we're doing is selling in the nicest meaning of the term. Business development. Business development is a gray area term. It can be a catch-all to refer to both marketing and sales, but business development really in the narrowest definition is sales. And you can see this because a lot of very large progressive firms, I shouldn't say a lot, but large progressive firms, and some of the mid-sized ones too, are separating the marketing and sales functions. They may have a CMO, a Chief Marketing Officer, and separate from that, they have a CBDO, a Chief Business Development Officer. The marketing department is focusing on the red carpet stuff, and the business development officer or the business development department is taking the leads that are generated or generating their own through networking and personal contacts and things like that and doing the selling. So they've really separated out the sales and business development in the truest form of what they mean. All right, as part of this, let's talk about what a CRM is. Marketing is all about lead generation, but at the core of your marketing, the foundation of your marketing program is what we refer to as your database. It's your customer relationship management system. It can be an email list of those you want to keep in touch with, but what you want to do is use software that lets you store and manage your prospect and customer information so that you can have it all in one central location. You can track your interactions, and you can engage with prospects and clients on a more personal level in terms of, oh, how was your vacation? How's the golf game going? All of the things that you would like to remember but can't if you haven't talked to somebody for a few months. It lets you a lot of the systems you can interface with your accounting systems. So there are many contact management systems, customer contact management systems, or customer relationship management systems. One that's seen often in larger law firms is Interaction by LexisNexis. Salesforce is one of the ubiquitous ones used across all industries. ACT has been around forever. And when we talk with firms, sometimes when we talk with firms, there's still a lot of firms that may have, everybody may have their own Outlook contact database or contact list, but it's not, there isn't one central firm-wide list. And one of the stumbling blocks here is usually that it just seems like such an uphill project in terms of getting it up and running. So what we would suggest is just start where you are. If you're in a firm with 5 partners and everybody has a drawer full of business cards, or you had a database 5 years ago, nobody's used it, it's not clean, and every time you go, oh my gosh, it's just forget it, it's just such an unmanageable project to try and clean it up, just start over. Get 25 contacts in there and just start adding from where you are, so that you don't have a stumbling block of, oh, we don't have that, or we're not going to get it done. Just start from where you are. Start putting that list together. Also, we found that it works best if you have one person in the firm who has a responsibility for entering new contacts, keeping the information updated in terms of everything is funneled through that person, as opposed to each secretary or assistant being responsible for it. So if there's a way to funnel all of the changes to one person in the firm, you're going to find that the most effective. It's interesting, too. Last week I was talking with our ACT consultant, and I was saying, you know, I don't hear that much about ACT anymore. And, you know, is it still being used? And he said, because he entered the business about the time I started the firm about 20 plus years ago, he said when he started, ACT was it. There was ACT, and for those who remember, there was ACT and Goldmine. And now, today, there are so many different programs. He said ACT is still definitely around. It's still up and running and, you know, being updated, but there are just so many different choices when you look at a contact management system. So you have to really think about what you need and make sure that it's not too complex, because some of these systems are very complex. They require a lot of training, and consequently, nobody uses them. Okay, these are terms. You're going, oh my gosh, why is she talking about advertising and public relations? I'm talking about advertising and public relations in terms of definitions, because I know that when I address audiences of professionals and I say, what's the difference between advertising and PR, the room is silent. All right, we know that advertising is free. We know that advertising is paid. You pay to run your ad. And public relations, a term that comes up when you talk about PR, is that it's free. You're not paying to have something placed. When you're talking about public relations, of course, really isn't free, right? You might have an agency such as us. There's an opportunity cost if you're doing it yourself, or somebody else in the firm is doing it. You're paying to look for those places to get your news out. The main difference between advertising is with advertising, you can control your message, right? You can put in that ad whatever you want, but that's what makes the audience skeptical, because we all know that, for instance, this gentleman in the ad is talking about himself, and how do we know if it's true? And he can say anything he wants. With public relations, you have the power of third-party credibility. When something's published, when I say published, it could be print, it could be broadcast online, but when you have something in the media, we tend to believe it more because it's third party. I'm not saying it about myself. It's the Wall Street Journal who's quoting me or quoting you. So it's that power of third-party credibility. And why is this so important today? And we'll talk a lot more about it. Because we need to be generating content that we can be distributing through social media, need it for our website. There's just this voracious appetite for content. And if you can be using content from credible sources, such as an article you published or being quoted, it's that much more powerful. So today, it's not just a matter of, I see you online that you were, quoted in this publication or that publication. It's how are you magnifying it and augmenting it. Okay, and that leads us, when we're talking about advertising, we're talking about advertorials versus native advertising. And there's a lot of gray area between these, so it's hard to really have a bright line because they tend to cross over. But advertorial, we know what an advertorial is. It looks like editorial content. But with an advertorial, we know we're reading, say, a sales piece. There's usually a call to action, give me a call. It looks like editorial content. It doesn't look like the typical ad if you're looking at the one here. So that's advertorial. But because audiences, because your markets, all of our markets have become so much more skeptical, what we have today is native advertising, which is advertising that educates and informs. And it looks like, the main difference is that it looks like it has the same tone in terms of look and verbiage that you see in whatever context you see this ad in. That's why it's called native advertising. It looks indigenous to the publication that it's in, the website, whatever. As I said, again, publication can be anything. But what it tends to do or tries to do, its role is to educate and inform and capture the credibility of the publication that it's in. So a lot of times you're reading content, you're reading something like this, and you may not even notice that it's sponsored content, that a law firm or another company paid to have this kind of information placed in on a website. What it allows you to control your message. It's advertising, but it tries to capture the credibility of public relations. Nothing wrong with that. It's great, that you should want to be looking for that sponsored content, that bright yellow sponsored content or something like that, that lets you separate out what is truly, I'll call it truly credible versus what is a paid placement. Okay. Talking more about public relations. Today, public relations there are different kinds of public relations, different than when we talked 20 years ago, let's say. Okay, you have your earned. You may hear talk of earned PR. Earned public relations is what we traditionally think of public relations. You've earned it. Whatever your news story is or whatever your expertise is, you've earned the right to be, or you've made a case to the journalist so that they're quoting you or they're running your story. It's earned. And that's the most credible. That's the highest, that's the brass ring. That's what we all want, earned public relations. There's also owned public relations. Owned would be your blog or anything that you're creating yourself, content that you're creating yourself, but it's also being used for PR purposes, social media purposes. Once again, there's a gray area here. So, but that's your owned public relations. Then there's shared. It's the PR that you're sharing, and that could be the story that appeared in the paper that you've earned, which then converts to shared public relations, or it can be your owned, your blog that you're sharing through social media. So once again, an overlapping area, but that's shared public relations. And then you have paid. You've all seen the paid PR. Paid is when you're looking at a website and you see all of these stories that pop up. That they want to try and entice you to click on this website, finding out how Californians are saving their investment portfolios. These are, you'll see at the top here, it says recommended by Outbrain. Outbrain is just one of the outfits that you give your content to, and they, through their algorithms, will determine where your paid content should be placed. So it's PR, it's advertising, but it's all paid. So these are the terms that you may hear. What you're, number one, what you're looking for as a firm is that earned PR. But the power of the earned PR comes from the magnification through the shared, owned, and paid. Okay. Responsive design. Responsive design is software that that builds web pages that detect a visitor's screen size so that the web page automatically fits to the size of the screen on the device that you're using. Now today, every website is responsive, but you may have a website that was done years ago that doesn't appear right on an iPhone, that wasn't done with responsive design. So if you're a firm that's in this situation, you may want to consider either having a mobile app that's done specially. It's not exactly a website, but it's done, it reformats what you have so that it appears in a way that's usable and readable on an iPhone or something similar, but that's still not responsive design. If you're embarking on a new website today, you want to make sure that it's going to be responsively designed. Most of the time, I mean, 99.9% of the time, you don't even have to say that because that's going to be assumed, but I would suggest that you do ask that. If you have a website that was done years ago and it's not responsively designed, I would definitely consider embarking on a new website now that is done that way, because we all know everybody's looking at their phones as opposed to their desktop. And you want to make sure that you are searchable and findable and readable on those phones. So if you haven't looked at your website on one of your iPhones, it's time to do so, and then determine about whether, if you were a prospect, would you be able to find what you want on that website? And if not, it's time to talk to a marketing agency or a web designer and make 2017 the year that you're going to redo your website. Search marketing. Search marketing. We all know how important it is to come to the top of rankings on Google, Yahoo, whatever search engine you're using. Search marketing encompasses two areas: search engine optimization, which is SEO, and search engine marketing, SEM, which is referred to as pay-per-click or Google AdWords. Okay, search engine optimization is when your website comes up at the top of near the top of the rankings because of what's called organic. It's because your content is so relevant to whatever the search terms are, it comes up at the top. And that's the ideal. It's become much more challenging to do. It's also affected by your social media. It's affected by many more factors today than it was 10 years ago. And become much more complex. But the ideal is to come up at the top because of the organic rankings that you have, because of the content that you have. And as you can see here below the dividing line, most of these came up because if you're doing an expert witness search, expert witness auto accident search, these came up because of their content at the top of the organic listings. Now, getting that content and social media footprint that's going to bring you to the top of the rankings is a challenge, and it takes time. It can be done, but it's a challenge. It takes time. It requires patience and expertise by the people who are doing it. If you want to come up to the top of the rankings tomorrow for certain search terms, you can pay to do it, and you've probably heard the term PPC, pay-per-click, or Google AdWords, which are really the overriding ways to embark on search engine marketing. What you're doing is you're bidding to come up to the top of the rankings through the advertised rankings, which are above the line here. These people all bid on coming up. When somebody searches on expert witnesses auto accidents, they have bid to come at the top. And when we click on one of those, they're going to be paying whatever they've bid. Now, the challenge is that just because they went to your website, that doesn't mean they're going to pick up the phone and call you. It's incumbent upon you to make sure that your website is persuasive, that it substantiates why they should call you if they need an expert witness in auto accidents. And you also have to remember that a lot of the times, when they click, it may not go to your home page, depending on depending on how this has been set up. So you want to be thinking on your websites. A lot of times we think, oh, they're going to enter the website through the home page, but that's not, a lot of the times that's not true. So you want to make sure that the pages that they do land on tell the story, the whole story, that would persuade somebody to pick up the phone and call. You also want to think about how sticky your website is, because you want somebody to click through. If you've paid, whether you've paid or if it's an organic ranking, you want somebody to click through and be enticed enough by the material that you have, that they stay on the pages, that they look at other pages. That's one of the factors you want to analyze when you're looking at some of the tracking results for your website. How sticky is it? Because we've seen where you may get a lot of clicks and you're paying a lot of money and you're using up your budget, and you find that people click and they jump off and very quickly, and that's what you don't want. So take a look. If you have the stats for your website, that's what we'll talk to your website provider and look at how sticky your website is. And if you're finding that people are clicking and then jumping off, you want to be addressing that. Okay, let's talk about content. You've probably heard that today content marketing is king. Content is king, and that's because of this voracious appetite that I mentioned before. It's how do we feed the social media machine? How do we feed our e-newsletters or our hard copy newsletters? How do we generate the material that's going to help us go head to head with competitors, and they could be much larger, but you can still go head to head with them online. It's through content. And content marketing is packaging your content so that you can use it to distribute. And the content needs to be it needs to be informative. It needs to be related to what your markets want to know about. It needs to be educational, not sales pieces. Today, that's just not what's going to work. Content marketing is about educating your audiences. Now, this is not any different than professionals have been doing for decades. Professionals have always marketed themselves through educating their market. But today, there's just such an expanded need and so many other avenues to do this through that it's become its own industry in a way. And where does this content come from? Well, if you look around your office, you'll see plenty of material that can be used to package into content. It can be maybe material from a brief that you wrote yesterday without breaking any kind of confidentiality. Can that be repackaged? Can what ideas were you thinking of when you were stuck in traffic yesterday? What trends have you been seeing in terms of, oh, that's the second time that somebody asked that question this week and I haven't heard that question before. There's a trend. There's so much you can package and create into content. But the challenge is that unless you hire an army of writers, it takes time to do, and you want to be thinking about how else you can be creating content, and that's where content curation comes in. Content curation has to do with making your firm or you the hub of a circle of, envisioning a circle of information. You pull in relevant content from all different sources. I'm sure you've received newsletters where they're very interesting, but it's not that they've created the content. They have done the searching and pulled in the content that might be relevant to intellectual property or project finance. It's how do you take this massive information on the web, pull out what's relevant to you, and then become the focal point so that when somebody does a search, you may come up, your firm may come up because of the content, not that you've created everything, but that you've been the focal point for all this content. That's what content curation is about, and that's a relatively new term. Once again, not a new idea, but so much more important today. Okay, what's a content management system? A CMS. CMS is the software that allows you to make changes to your content without having to call your website developer and saying, you know what, can you post this today, or, you know, that's dated material, can you change the date, and then having to wait 3 days if you're lucky until they make the changes and maybe it's right or not right. Content management systems allow you to go on the back end of your blog, your website, whatever, and just make the text changes yourself. So most websites today have a content management system. When you're having your website developed or your blog developed, you want to make sure that you're asking about that. There are still a lot around that don't and have to go through where you make the call to your developer and then wait until they have the time to do it. So you want to make sure that there's a CMS, a content management system. Okay, one thing about marketing today is how much more visual it's become. And I think for those of us that have been marketing for a long time, I know for myself, I see my own mind changing in terms of thinking more in terms of visuals. And in terms of marketing, when I'm thinking even about our own marketing, how can we do that visually? And what's become so important today and very attention-getting are infographics. Infographics make complex information much more digestible, engaging, enticing. So when you're thinking about how to package your information, you want to be thinking in terms of visuals, and infographics are a great way to go. Sometimes it's hard to quantify the information you have, but it can still be enumerated. It could be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the points you want to make. It can be still packaged and quantified in a way that can make it much more engaging than if you were just going to write out the same information. So you want to be thinking about infographics. Infographics take the different, not every graphic designer can do an infographic. They're specialists in creating these. You want to find the right people, but definitely be thinking in terms of infographics. Infographics are very strong in terms of being shared, reshared on social media, reblasted. They're great for helping to come up at the top of search engine rankings and SEO. So be thinking about these in terms of all of that material that you have sitting around your office right now. Okay, marketing automation. Marketing automation is, at its base, it's software, a software platform that allows you to more effectively market on multiple channels online, such as email, social media, and other online channels. It lets you automate repetitive tasks. Now, the idea when you're thinking about marketing automation, you might be thinking about, for instance, Amazon. You go on Amazon and you're searching for something and it says, you know, other people search for these, maybe you're interested in these items. It's looking at how it's automating the process of converting a prospective client to a client. So an example might be that you send an email to your markets to download your book on intellectual property, or not, you know, intellectual property in 2017, your ebook, let's say. There's automatically a thank you letter or thank you email that goes out to everybody who downloads it. Then days later, you're going to send, the system will send a follow-up email to those who downloaded the book, and then you're going to offer them a case study that's relevant to the book and your practice. And then if you have a sales team, you're going to be providing that lead to your sales team, your business development team. But more likely, you're the salesperson. You're going to be the one who picks up the phone and is going to follow up on that lead. And what you're doing is, instead of, okay, I sent, you know, these are the people who downloaded the book, now let me go and send an individual email to each person, and then let me go and send a thank you letter or thank you email. It automates the process. That's really what we're talking about with marketing automation. We're going to see more and more of it. If, as a firm, you might not have a whole marketing automation system, but you want to look at how you can automate some of the processes. Whether it's just being able to post a blog and then have it distributed to through all social media, whether it's having an automatic, when somebody subscribes to your newsletter, having an automatic email, and then maybe a follow-up email. So you want to be thinking about what pieces of your marketing can be automated. And that's going to be, if there's one buzzword for 2017, it would be marketing automation. Okay, so I could go on. There must be a million words that, in terms of the marketing lingo today, that could be, we could talk about more definitions, and perhaps in another webinar I'll go into more detail. I could also give a webinar on each of these slides. There's so much information to talk about, but I know short and sweet is what everybody wants today. So I just appreciate that you listened. I know that you're focused on business development, and I know that everybody listening understands the criticality of marketing, and I know that knowledge is the first step in making your marketing more effective, and that's what you've done today in terms of learning more definitions. I appreciate you listening. Please stay tuned for our next webinar. Megan Braverman, our principal, is going to be recapping the 24th Annual Marketing Partner Forum, which is going to be held in Rancho Palos Verdes next week. If you can't make it yourself, please join us. We'll have a recap. And if you have any questions, please contact me. I'd be happy to talk to you. Thank you very much.